Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, better known on the internet as 2Sweet MTG, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host James. James, how's it going? Are you well?
I am well. Pretty psyched. We're going to chat about one of my favourite things to do in Cube, personally.
Yeah, I'm really hyped for today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about the best cheat targets for Cube. These are the big nasties that you're putting into play to win you a game. But more than that, how you cheat a creature into play will determine the type of thing that you want to play. Like, for example, Flash asks for a different thing to put into play than a reanimation spell. Like, the best card in a Tinker deck won't be the same as the best card in an Oath of Druids deck. So what we've done is we've broken down the most popular ways of cheating your big things into play, and we are going to rank those threats that you're putting into play with them. So what we've done is I've come up with my top 5 list, and then James is going to judge it and see if he agrees with it, or we're going to talk about what we would change. Hopefully what this will do is it'll give you an idea of what creatures to either add to your cube, or if you're drafting a cube, which ones to pick if you think you're leaning towards one of those decks. But also, what this should help show you is that there are overlaps. Some creatures are good in multiple decks. Some decks are good in Reanimator. Some decks are good in sneak attack decks. And if you're running those decks in your cubes, these can be the cards that you look to run as like nice overlap cards. It's basically when you're building a cube, you want things to overlap. You want that bit of synergy. It just makes everything a little bit smoother, everything a little bit nicer. I think a good place to start for today is let's kick off with a classic, James. Let's talk about Reanimator. So just quickly before we talk about the threats that we're going to be cheating into play in a Reanimator deck, just for those unaware, how does a Reanimator deck actually cheat things into play, and kind of what are we looking for in a stereotypical Reanimator target?
Yeah, for sure. So we've done a whole episode on Reanimation in the past, so do go back and give that a listen if you'd like a bit more of a deep dive. But the fundamental strategy we're going for with a Reanimator deck is to put a large creature into our graveyard and then return it to play with a reanimation spell. So reanimation spells, anything which gets a creature directly out of our graveyard onto the battlefield. And the ones we're going to be interested in here are the ones which aren't restricted by the mana value of a creature. So we're not interested in things like Unearth that only gets a cheap creature back. We want to be putting 7 and 8 mana creatures into play here. And by doing that, obviously, we're getting around the mana cost for those creatures. We're a huge mana advantage. You're paying somewhere in the region of 1 to 3 mana and putting a 7 or 8 mana card into play. The way this plays out is often a bit like a 3-card combo, in that you can need a big creature in your hand, a discard outlet to get it into the graveyard, and then a way to bring it back from the graveyard. But you can kind of break that paradigm if you have something like Entomb, for example, which just puts any creature directly from your library into the graveyard. Well, now it's only a 2-card combo, so that can be very powerful. Despite being a kind of a 3-card combo, though, the Reanimation does have some advantages over other ways we might cheat big things into playing Cube. Firstly, the Reanimation spells, if you play the best ones, are really, really pushed. They're really efficient. Things like Animate Dead at 2 mana or Reanimate at 1 mana. And they also actually have quite a lot of flexibility because some of them can also hit your opponent's graveyard. So even when your deck isn't playing out how you'd hoped and you haven't managed to put a big creature in your yard, you still get some flexibility out of that. So that's really nice. But I think the biggest thing which Reanimator has over something like Tinker or Sneak Attack, for example, as a way to put a big creature into play, is that Reanimator offers you redundancy. There's no cards which you can put in addition to Tinker to give you redundancy for that effect. It's just too unique. With Sneak Attack, you have Through the Breach, and then that's it. And what that means is if I'm drafting a deck to maximize Tinker, my deck also has to be able to do other things. Unless I'm incredibly good at tutoring for Tinker, I can't just build my whole game plan around having access to that effect every game. But with Reanimate, because there are so many good reanimation spells, in a lot of cubes, I will be able to get, say, in the region of 4 Reanimate spells. And that means I can pretty reliably see one in every game. And that means I can build a much more linear deck. I don't have to really have as many backup plans, potentially. Sometimes you are more mid-rangey with a Reanimator plan, but you can be very, very linear and therefore very, very fast and consistent.
No, 100%. Yeah, definitely. One of the best things about Reanimator is that you can have multiple of them in your same deck, in the same deck, and also a lot of the cards you mentioned are all uncommons as well. So these decks can appear in so many cubes. It is kind of like it's a very classic cheat something into play strategy. All right. So James, here's my list. You be gentle, okay? All right. My number 5 is Sundering Titan. This is an 8-mana 7/10 that when it comes into play or leaves play, choose a land of each basic land type, then destroy those lands. So I've put this on my list. So there was flexibility with my 5th slot. It was almost Iona. But I picked Sundering Titan because one of the things you can do with Reanimator is you can do this very early. Like, you can turn 1 Entomb, turn 2 Reanimate. If you're doing that on turn 2, you are effectively, the board is, you might have 1 land in play, your opponent has no lands in play, and you have a 7/10. That seems quite strong to me. So that's why Sundering Titan has made the 5th slot on my list. What do you think of Big Sunny T here?
Yeah, I love a Sundering Titan. Gets a lot better if you're the fewer colors you are, right? So if you can be mono black, Sundering Titan's particularly good because you don't want to have to blow up your own lands, or if you are blowing up your own lands, you want to only blow up one of them. But yeah, no, Sundering Titan's a very strong card and great against removal spells, right? One of the key things we want here is if we're going to the effort of cheating something big into play, we don't want them to just be able to kill it and we didn't get any value. Well, Sundering Titan makes it hard to kill because you blew up their lands on the way in. And then even if they do get the mana together for a removal spell, well, you're going to kill more of their lands on the way out.
Yeah. If you get an early Sundering Titan, it's just kind of miserable for your opponent. And that's kind of, it's one of these ones that kind of like, I keep forgetting about it because it is just, it's banned in Commander, so as you never see it there as well. It's one of those ones where kind of like, I kind of forget about it until my opponent plays against me and like, oh yes, Sundering Titan. Yeah, that's really strong. That sucks. But yeah. I think Sundering Titan deserves to be on this list. It will appear later as a spoiler for some of our other threats, but yeah, I think Sundering Titan is a solid one. My number 4, James, is Troll of Khazad-dûm. This is a 6-mana 6/5 that can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, but importantly, it has swamp cycling for a single black. So why I like this and why it's high on my list is because effectively this and a reanimation spell lets you cheat it in early. This is one of the few cards with the swamp cycling that puts itself into the graveyard. You don't need another effect to put it into the graveyard. And the fact that it can also fix you for the land that you need to then cast the reanimate on the next turn, I think is quite nice. It is not the highest in terms of just ceiling of raw power. There are some very strong cards coming on this list, but I think it's just, if you put this in your deck, it is going to come out and it is going to do work.
Yeah, I love this pick. I had this on my list as well, actually. I think this is a great shout. The big thing for me is this doesn't take the slot of a reanimation target, right? It takes the slot of a land and you get a target for free. Obviously, if the best thing you could reanimate in your deck was a Troll of Khazad-dûm, you probably wouldn't call yourself a reanimator deck.
100%, yeah.
But it's the draws where you don't draw a way to get one of your incredible 8-drops into the graveyard. You'll be really glad you have the Troll of Khazad-dûm because just turn 2, put a 6/5 into play that you basically can't block in the early game. That still wins a lot of games. Even in like the most powerful cube, that'll still win a lot of games.
100%. Like this, like Legacy Reanimator, or like it's more like a bug scam kind of deck, but it's winning with Troll of Khazad-dûm. That's the thing it's doing, just because the ability to fix yourself on turn 1 is so incredibly strong. But yeah. I really like the Troll. I think it's one of the best cards printed recently for this archetype. We're going back in time now to, I think probably 5 years ago was the best Reanimator target. It has slipped, in my humble opinion. At number 3, James, I've gone for Griselbrand. So Griselbrand is an 8-mana 7/7 demon, flying lifelink, and you can pay 7 life to draw 7 cards. So why Griselbrand has always been good in Reanimator decks is that, well, it's a flying 7/7. Those tend to end games of Magic. But the ability to, at instant speed, pay 7 life to draw 7 cards means that, depending on how you've built your deck, you can either instant speed draw or try and draw the counter magic to protect it if you don't have it in hand, or you can try and draw the next bit of reanimation spells because, as James mentioned at the start, Reanimator decks tend to have more than one bits of reanimation in them. You can pay 7 life at instant speed to try and get the next reanimation effect, dig for that in case they do ever remove the Grizzlebrand. Why I've put this lower on my list is because it's just not as good with Reanimate, and we have other things I think have just pushed that. Like there are worlds where if you reanimate this, if you fetch shocked, that kind of stuff, you can be on a very low life total very quickly. And for Grizzlebrand to be good, you need to be drawing the cards. But if your life is so low that you can't activate it, then it's not great. That's kind of my opinion on Grizzle Daddy anyway. James, what do you think of Grizzlebrand?
Yeah, for sure. This is exactly why I'd have it on my list as well. I think it is worse than the top two, which we're going to get to, but it snowballs games in ways that not a lot of cards do. 7 cards is so many. What you'll often do, right, is if you can get it into fountain really early, sometimes you'll draw the cards right away, even though you're going to have to discard a bunch to hand size, because you can discard more reanimation targets and you're going to draw more reanimation spells. When you have a good draw and you're not under a ton of pressure, Grizzlebrand is like second to none. The issue is, you say 7 life is a lot to pay. If you're behind, it can be tricky, right? If you put this into play, you're on a low life total, they point a removal spell at it. Can you afford to pay 7 life? And quite right, point out, if you paid 8 life to put it into play with a reanimate, or even life death is another one of the popular reanimation spells, which also costs you the life. I mean, at that point, if you pay 7, you're 15 life deep. Which means that in that spot, you probably can't afford to draw cards until you've hit them and gained 7 with the Grizzlebrand itself. So if they kill it before it gets to do that, well, you're in a lot of trouble.
Exactly. And it's also worth mentioning that kind of some of the reanimation spells also do minus some stuff on power, which can be relevant with the lifelink on this. Like, doesn't Animate Dead -1 from the power of the card it's bringing back? Or like, there's a couple that like that becomes more important with Grizzlebrand, where the life is a resource for drawing cards, basically. So some of the ones we're going to be getting to don't have that life as a resource kind of element to it. But yeah, I think Grizzlebrand still an iconic card, but yeah, it has kind of dropped a little bit. I'll be honest, my number 2 and number 1 I think are quite interchangeable, but my number 2, I have gone for Atraxa Grand Unifier in second place. This is 3 and 4 colors of mana that aren't red for a 7/7 Phyrexian Angel with flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink, and when it enters, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type among the revealed cards into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So realistically, this is a ETB draw 3 or 4 the majority of times. Why this, I feel, is better than Grizzlebrand is because you get those cards immediately. You don't need to, there's never any danger of you need to wait to attack if your life is lower. You're always going to get it, and just the body is just so good. Like flying, vigilance, death touch, lifelink. It will be bigger than every. It does the Reanimator thing of being bigger than every other creature on the board. That's great, but then also just 10 cards is a lot, and you can cherry pick. So you can ideally you are getting a removal spell or a counter spell. You are getting the next reanimation effect or the next thing to put into your grave. There's just so many bits you can do with this, and Atraxa, super strong Magic card. I think it definitely deserves its place above Grizzlebrand. Arguably could be top, but James, what do you think of Atraxa as a Reanimator target?
Yeah, this is absolutely premium for Reanimator. It's kind of like a Grizzlebrand that you don't have to pay the life, right? You're drawing say maybe 4 cards, but they're pretty much going to be the best 4 of your top 10. And so you're going to be able to hit maybe another reanimation spell if they kill this, or a counter spell to protect it, maybe a discard spell to protect it. Really powerful. And sure, Grizzlebrand, when left uncontested, will draw more cards from this, but in reality, that doesn't really matter, because the thing is, this draws enough cards for you to win the game, and that's all you need, right? You don't actually need, the second activation of Grizzlebrand very often to win. And this one, if you bring this in, you're under a ton of pressure. You don't have to pay any life. You're getting those cards right away, so you can deploy them right away and get yourself back stable on board, maybe even if they have the removal spell for this. Yeah, love Atraxa. Absolutely premium for Reanimator.
Nice. Which means people might have been able to work out my number one choice is Archon of Cruelty. This is an 8-mana 6/6 flying Archon, and whenever it enters or attacks, target opponent sacks a creature or a planeswalker, discards a card, loses 3 life, you draw a card, and you gain 3 life. So why I've put this higher than Atraxa is that this is still giving you that card advantage, but by the time that this is attacked, that it's a 12-point life swing. You've drawn 2 cards, your opponent has discarded 2 cards and sacked 2 creatures. Why I like this is because effectively, if you're doing this, this has the potential to answer what your opponent is doing as well as giving you just an obscene amount of value. Like, even just on ETB, 6-point life swing, draw a card, they remove a creature. I remove a creature. Like, yes, it is a edict effect. So if they have a bunch of tokens, that kind of sucks. But like, you could be doing this so early in the game. Again, with Reanimator specifically, you can do it so early that you can just answer their whole board by the time this attacks. But even late game, this is going to be bigger than the majority of things that are coming out, and just two of those sacks is just going to take care of their board so quickly, on top of the cards that you're drawing, on top of like the removal that's in your black deck. For me, I think Archon is best for that reason, but I am open to the conversation of maybe it and Atraxa should be swapped around. What do you think of Archon of Cruelty, James?
Yeah, phenomenal card. So it's the fact it has such a big impact when you're behind, right? Getting that edict, getting the life gain. The life gain's really huge, actually. It is every single bit of that text really matters. Yeah, it does a lot to stabilize you as soon as it hits, and if you get to attack with it even once, you've probably won the game. I think it's really close which way you go between Archon and Atraxa. I had them the other way around just because I think if you don't get to attack with it, the Atraxa trigger is slightly more powerful than the Archon trigger, but they're really close. You could go either way. And certainly when you do get to attack with it, Archon is a lot better. Other nice thing about Archon is it doesn't come up a ton because it is a lot of mana, but if you have something like a Dark Ritual in your Reanimator deck, which is certainly a card you want in Reanimator, you do sometimes get to cast the Archon in the mid-game, right? Which is less possible with Atraxa because it costs 4 colors.
No, I'd agree with that. So for me, for specifically Reanimator, I would put Archon higher. But one thing that we'll see when we start talking about the other archetypes is that in other decks, Atraxa does have more legs because it does interact with more other decks. So that's kind of one of the reasons why you often see both of them in cubes, is because they're both really good, but also Atraxa goes in a bunch of other decks, which we'll get onto in a little bit. So kind of that's my top 5 for Reanimator. Next up, the next category is Instant Speed Reanimator, and this is different. Reanimation. All the threats we've gone over so far are cards that can just naturally sit in your graveyard, but there's some very strong cards that go into your graveyard and then go away. But you can respond to that, James. Talk to us about Instant Speed Reanimator.
Yeah, so with this, we're primarily talking about cards like Corpse Dance, Shallow Grave, Goryo's Vengeance, which they're instant speed, so you don't have so you get to respond to triggers with them, which is really big, and they give the creature haste and then exile the creature at your next end step. There's only a few of these in Cube, but it is a actually relatively distinct thing from the creatures you want for regular Reanimator. So the upsides are you get to attack for it right away, and it actually opens up options to reanimate which weren't previously available to you. This is cards like Emrakul, which when it enters the graveyard, a trigger will go on the stack to shuffle your graveyard into your library. So not possible for regular sorcery speed reanimates. It won't be there. But if you have an instant, you can respond to that trigger. So you cast Shallow Grave in response to that trigger. If the Emrakul comes back, you get to attack for it right away because it has haste. It's going to hit them for 15 in the air with Annihilator 6. That game is pretty much over. They're also just really powerful with a lot of the stuff that you would want to regularly reanimate those. Like Shallow Grave and Archon of Cruelty, I think, is mostly better than like Animate Dead and Archon of Cruelty, right? Because you're getting the hit in right away. It's kind of debatable, but it's certainly incredibly powerful. But it also, there's a bunch of scars which are good to reanimate in a normal way where you wouldn't be interested in these Shallow Grave effects, right? Because you're not going to get it sticking around on the battlefield in the long term. So think something like Iona, for example, which is the big angel which says your opponents can't cast spells of this color. You get that back. You hit them for, I think it's a 9/9, so you hit them for 9 in the air. That's fine, but then it just goes away. That prison element doesn't matter at all because they're just going to get to untap and cast their spells, and that's gone. Also, crucially, it does exile at the end step. I have seen quite a few people try and Shallow Grave something like a Woodfall Primus, which has a powerful dies trigger. That will not work because it exiles, so you don't get any death triggers. So like Worldspine Worm is one people think like, I can instant reanimate it because I can respond to a trigger. And like, that's good if the 15 damage kills them, but you aren't going to get the death trigger again.
Cool. Yeah. It definitely opens up a different way of doing Reanimator, and it is very cool and very interesting. And kind of, I have tried to lean into that a little bit with my list because if we're going to do it, I think we should be leaning into it. So at number 5, I have put Ulamog the Infinite Gyre. This is an 11/11, 10/10 with Indestructible. When you cast this spell, destroy target permanent. So importantly, you won't get that if you are doing it with Instant Reanimation. But importantly, it does have Annihilator 4. I think annihilating, like we'll get to Emrakul, don't worry. But just Annihilator 4 is when it attacks, defending player sacrifice 4 permanents. Again, this just has the potential to effectively be just to wipe out all their lands. This is incredibly strong. You can wipe everything they have in play, and like yes, they could. The one thing with Ulamog and why it's lower on my list here is because yes, they can just block it, so they don't take the 10 damage. But to an extent, for them to do that, they need to have at least 5 things in play for that to happen, and that requires them sacking their 4 lands and blocking with their 1 creature. So you are kind of giving them that tough choice of like, do you want to take 10? Or do you want to have lands in play? I think Annihilator is exceptionally strong with these instant reanimation effects because it does kind of come out of nowhere. It is terrifying. I put Ulamog number 5, James. What do you think about Ulamog as an instant speed reanimator effect?
Yeah, I like it. The Annihilator ones or the Eldrazi are really strong. I will say there's, even with the instant speed thing, it can sometimes lead to a bit of awkwardness where you're like, well, I have my looter in play and I get to loot, but I don't have my corpse stance yet. And I can't discard my Ulamog because it shuffles back in, right? So it's still a downside that you can't just leave it in your graveyard and reanimate it when you want to. You have to discard it and reanimate it right away. But having said that, this effect, if you get it off reasonably early, will pretty much win you the game, right? If your opponent sacrifices their 4 lands, it's going to be stupidly hard for them to come back from that. It can have a thing where slightly later into the game, the board's built out a bit. They maybe sacrifice like 2 lands and 2 tokens and take 10, and they, obviously that still matters, but it's not necessarily a game-ending thing, right? But if you can put it together relatively early, it is devastating.
No, definitely. I would agree with that. That's why it's on my list, just because I think I am looking at this, it kind of just like the Reanimator deck singing and humming. Like a lot of these effects can just go into like control decks naturally. I don't think Instant Speed Reanimator works as well in a control deck as just like regular Reanimator does. So I personally think if you're going down the instant speed route, you're more all in trying to get it off. And that's where I think kind of like these big titans are quite high, to such an extent that on number 4 I put Kozilek, Butcher of Tooth, which is a very similar Magic card, but it has 12 power. It still has Annihilator 4. If you were to cast it, it would have draw 4 cards on it. But like not too much variety here. But I think for me, just with the instant speed one, you are going a bit more all in. That's kind of how I view it, and just I think just I found these to be very strong, basically. But I think, yeah, open to that discussion. But I'll kind of go through my list a bit more because at number 3 I do have Archon of Cruelty. It was number 1 on my previous list, but here, as you mentioned before, it's effectively what you are getting. You're hitting for 6. You're hitting for 6, and you're draining for 6. So it's a 12-point life swing plus 6 damage. That's a lot. That's that is an 18-point life swing. That is a lot of damage, and just it's a lot to get through. On top of them discarding 2 cards, on top of you drawing 2 cards, like this. Generally speaking, with these kind of effects, I do like the game to end, but I think this just puts you so far ahead in terms of board, in terms of hand, in terms of setting up your next couple of turns. I think Archon works really nicely in this deck.
Yeah, for sure. 12-point life swing, they sack 2 creatures, they discard 2 cards. You're so far ahead if this works. And has the nice flexibility of, I can also have sorcery speed reanimation in my deck, and this works with both of them. Whereas the Eldrazi, you have to be like pretty committed to, I just have instant speed reanimates, and then maybe something like a sneak attack, which also works well with the Eldrazi. They don't gel very well with the sorcery speed reanimator effects. So they're both contextually incredibly powerful, but you do need to be mindful when you're building your deck of what other ways do I have of cheating creatures into play, and do I have creatures that work with both of them, or do I have I have a corpse dance that works with these 2 creatures and an animate dead that works with these 2 creatures, but they don't overlap, is a bit of a tough spot. So it is one to bear in mind as you're deck building, but yeah, I think they're both really powerful if you make them work.
Makes sense. My next one, I do feel, is ramping up the power level to 11 a little bit. All right, at number 2, we're ramping up the power level a bit. At number 2, we have Blightsteel Colossus. This is...
And with that, the trap card has been activated.
What do you mean? If Blightsteel Colossus we put into a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it, and shuffle it into its owner's library instead, does that not work with these, James?
The crucial word here is instead, unfortunately. This is a replacement effect, not a trigger. So if you would put Blightsteel Colossus into your graveyard, instead you shuffle it into your library. So it never is in the graveyard. It never goes to your graveyard. It never goes to your graveyard.
That's irritating.
Whereas the other ones say when Emrakul would be put into your graveyard, then a trigger goes onto the stack. This just never hits the graveyard.
Right.
This is something I think you're certainly not alone in this assumption. It's a mistake lots of people make once, but sadly not good with Shallow Grave.
Right. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we caught that. Thank you, James. This is why I'm making the list, and you're telling me if I'm right or not. So I appreciate that. All right. So at number 2, we have Griselbrand. Yeah, let's put Griselbrand at number 2. I'm assuming it must be good here because you're not waiting to hit to gain the life back, so you are going to be gaining 7 life with it because it's going to be attacking when it comes into play with the Shadow Grave effect. So you're going to be able to draw at least 14 cards and set yourself up for the rest of the game. That seems pretty strong, actually. Maybe Griselbrand should have been number 2 the whole time. I mean, no, Griselbrand was definitely... You passed the test, James, with the Blightsteel Colossus. Well done.
Yeah, Griselbrand Shallowgrave's really good because you get the hit in that turn. You're not waiting to gain the life, so you can kind of get the cards for free. It doesn't cost you cards on the way in. Also, Loki, quite good on their turn sometimes. They attack you with a bunch of stuff. You just Shallowgrave a Bristleband, block their creature, gain a bunch of life, draw a bunch of cards.
Ooh, that is nice. Yeah, turning it into a removal spell is pretty hot, actually. Nice, I like that. Yeah, big RKO Griselbrand out of nowhere. Okay, that's nice. All right, my number 1 we have touched on, and it is Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, the 15 mana, 15/15 squiddly fish. Importantly, this has flying, protection from spells that are 1 or more colors, and it has Annihilator 6, and it also has the Eldrazi Shuffle In effect that does go to your graveyard. This is effectively, this can just kill them out of nowhere, and that's like normally with the other ones, I like cards that kind of like, or like things with Archon and things with Griselbrand is that it sets you up for future turns. with Emrakul, you don't need future turns because they've had to sacrifice 6 permanents and you've hit them for 15 in the air. Like, they're normally dead at that point. Would you agree, James? That kind of like Emrakul is generally one of the strongest reanimation, or like one of the strongest cheat targets in general, and this is just one way of getting it into play, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, once they've sacked 6 permanents and taken 15, even if they're not dead, they're pretty much a lame duck most of the time, right? They're sitting there with no permanents and they're on 3 or whatever, and you can kill them with a ham sandwich, basically.
Yeah.
There's like occasionally it comes up, right, that they can sack everything except for one big creature and try and kill you on the crackback, but it's pretty rare. You don't survive hits from Emrakul very often. Certainly a premium one if you're shallow graving.
Yeah, very scary. Cool. Thank you, James. I feel like I learned something with that, so thank you.
That's nice. I do quite like the shallow grave corpse dancey stuff as a way of making your Reanimator decks feel different in your cube. It adds a nice little wrinkle, and all the targets you mentioned are all cards which do other stuff in cube as well, right? It's not like you're just putting them in to make these few cards work. But I think it gives your Reanimator decks a little bit more variety if you have varying effects for want different cards rather than they all just want the same things, right? And also worth noting, I think 4 of the 5 were legendary. So I also quite like Goryo's Vengeance. I think that's a bit underappreciated as a cube card. And it has the advantage over things like Corpse Dance that it doesn't care about Graveyard Order. Because caring about Graveyard Order is honestly obnoxious. That's like the worst thing about Corpse Dance.
As someone who plays a lot of Canadian Highlander Dredge, I just learned to accept. I play Graveyard Orders in Commander just because I mistakenly might have put a card in that cares about it. But yeah, I do just quality of life. 100%. I do agree with that. I do. Are there any obvious cards you feel I've missed, James, on this list? Actually,
no. I think those are really the big ones. I think. Like those are great. Atali, I like a lot. The one that casts, you flip from your deck and your opponent's deck until you hit spells and it casts them. That card's great. Atraxa, again, really good here. Gains you a bunch of life, draws you a bunch of cards. But I think that was a really solid top 5.
Okay, marvelous. Good to hear. All right, let's keep the ball rolling. Next up, we have Sneak Attack and Through the Breach. So I'll read them both quickly. Sneak Attack is 3 and a red for an enchantment. You may pay a red, and you may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. That creature gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. And then Through the Breach is effectively a 5-mana spell that does that effect as a one-shot. But it is an instant, which is quite nice. And it does have Splice onto Arcane that may come up once ever. I don't know if Cultivate or the Arcane spell is in Cube nowadays. But James, talk to me kind of what is this deck trying to do and what kind of creatures is it looking for to really get the most out of them?
Yeah, Sneak Attack's really powerful. The big advantage Sneak Attack has over something like a Reanimation effect is that it is very much it's easier to put together in that you just need a Sneak Attack and a target. It doesn't have to put something in the graveyard. So it is kind of just less work in that sense. Obviously, the downside is that with both Sneak Attack and Through the Breach, these are essentially 5-mana plays. Like Sneak Attack costs 4, but you really almost always want to be able to activate it the turn you play it. Playing Sneak Attack and passing the turn is kind of unnecessarily opening the door to get it killed. But yeah, these are really powerful. So you're going to get any ETB triggers of the creatures, any attack triggers of the creatures, and any death triggers of the creatures, as well as just an attack with a creature which deals damage. With that in mind, that means a lot of the fatties you'll put in cubes anyway will work really well here. In a way which they don't with things like Shallow Grave because they exile. So but you really want something that's going to either leave value behind, so something like a World Spine Worm, where when it dies you get 3 5/5s, or something that's going to draw you a bunch of cards on the way in, or maybe something that is just going to kill the opponent.
No, definitely. I would agree with all that. One also nice thing is kind of like, yeah, I going to mention earlier that kind of like this does overlap quite nicely with some of the other decks because I've often used Sneak Attack as a discard outlet. You just the creature just happens to go through play and hit them once while it goes to graveyard, so then you can reanimate it. So I really do like Sneak Attack. I'm a sucker for it. I think you might have mentioned my number 5 earlier, James. Number 5, I do have Atali Primal Conqueror. This is a 7-mana 7/7 with trample. And when it enters, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells from among those non-land cards without paying their mana costs. And then it has a 10-mana transform thing that we don't care about. So why I like this in Sneak Attack specifically is that it's doing the thing of Sneak Attack does best of like you are attacking, like you are hitting them with a 7/7 trample. That is just generally good. We love that. But then it's leaving something behind. You are getting value off of your deck and your opponent's deck. And in theory, there are no bad cards in Cube. Like you could whiff and get and hit a counter spell off of your opponent's deck, something like that. But like generally just getting 2 cards worth of value effectively for 1 single red is what you've invested in this to get this into play, on top of dealing them 7 damage with trample, I think is quite nice. I quite like Atali in a Sneak Attack, James. What do you think about this big dino lad?
Yeah, I like Atali a lot. I think it's it's quite high variance, right? You can get there are no bad cards in Cube, but you do sometimes get like Ver Elvish Mystic and your Spell Pierce, and you're pretty sad, right? But you're on average, you're getting quite a lot out of a trigger, and you're getting a hit in, and maybe you get it back later. I think it's pretty solid, and I like this card as well because it kind of works with most of the ways you cheat things in, right? Because it's an ETB trigger, you're getting the value off a Sneak Attack, but you'd also get the value off a Reanimate or a Flash or whatever it might be. There is also a nice trick you can do with this if you're playing with the top deck tutors, like Vamp Tutor, stuff like that.
Very cool. Yes.
Yeah, because they're mostly instant speed. You can respond to a trigger, Vamp Tutor for, say, another large creature, and then you just get to cast that. You're taking the variance out of the equation, which is nice.
No, that's sweet. I do like that. Yeah. I do like being able to set up the top of your graveyard. That is very fun with Atali. My number 4 is another card you have mentioned previously, James, and that is Worldspine Worm. That is 11 mana for a 15/15 trample that when it dies, you create 3 5/5 green worm creature tokens with trample. And then it has, when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. So why this is great, again, similar to Atali, you are hitting them, but for more damage, you're hitting them for 15 trample. That's quite a lot of trample damage. But then, if somehow they're alive, you have 3 5/5s with trample in play. I don't see a world where, like, unless they specifically have a board wipe, they just die at that point. And then you still have a Sneak Attack, and you're great. I think Worldspine Worm is a really strong card in this deck.
Yes, I think Sneak Worldspine Worm, I think, is incredibly pushed. Like you compare this to Atali, for example, right? You're hitting them for twice as much damage, and is 2 free spells? How often is 2 free spells going to be better than 3 5/5s? I'd say pretty rarely, right? So I think it is a much more powerful sneak target than Atali. The only thing to consider is when you're building a Sneak Attack deck, right? Say you just have sneak, you don't have Through the Breach, and then you want, say, like 4 things to sneak in, right? So that you can have a decent chance of drawing a target when you draw your sneak. You really want other stuff to do with those things, right? And this is why we talk about having the overlap between different ways to cheat stuff into play. Now, if your other ways with your sneak are like a Flash or a Shallow Grave or something that works really well with Worldspine Worm, then yes, Worldspine Worm's absolutely premium, because I think it is, just on power level with the Sneak Attack alone, it is absolutely one of the top ones. If your other ways of cheating stuff into play was, say, an Animate Dead, that doesn't work with Worldspine Worm, so you might rather have Atali, even though Atali is less powerful than Sneak Attack. These are the things you want to be thinking about as you're building your deck. But just considering Sneak Attack on its own, absolutely, I think Worldspine Worm is premium.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think so. My next choice is kind of in line with what you were saying in terms of just I think it goes in this deck and there's a bit more overlap with it, and also I think this is just slightly more castable because at number 3 I have Vaultborn Tyrant. From a raw power level point of view, I think Worldsworn Worm has a higher upside, but I think just in games, I think this actually just does a bit more and will win you games. But let me read the card first. I'm jumping ahead. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Vaultborn Tyrant is a 7-mana 6/6 with Trample. That when it or another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life and you draw a card. And then when it dies, if it's not a token, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So why I like this is that this is a 6/6 trample that's coming in, it's drawing you a card, and it's gaining you 3 life. You hit with that, and then at the end of turn, when it dies from sneak attack, you get another copy, you get another 3 cards, and you draw another card. It's doing a bit more to stabilize you than Worldspine Worm. Admittedly, you can just win a game with Worldspine Worm. So again, these could be flipped, is what I'm saying. But I think Vaultborn Tyrant is just very good at coming in, doing this thing sneak attack once, and setting you up for the next couple of turns of the game. It leaves you less open to things going wrong. Basically, I do concede from just a killing your opponent point of view. Maybe Worldspine Worm is a bit more efficient. When you were talking about what would you rather have, 2 cards or 3 5/5s, I was like, maybe Vaultborn Tyrant isn't as good as Worldswine Worm. But I think in the average game, because also if you don't draw the sneak attack, you will get to a point in a lot of cubes where you can cast this. You are never hard casting Worldswine Worm or even a Tali most of the time. But 7 mana is very doable in cubes where, Llanowar Elves is decent, you can cast a Vaultborn Tyrant, I think, and that's kind of where I am with this. And I guess as well, the Vaultborn Tyrant does work well with other sneak attack targets because it is drawing you into more sneak attack targets. That's where card draw gets really good with sneak attack, is because it's drawing you into more things to kill your opponent with. Because every creature from then onwards is just a single red to hit your opponent in the face with. What do you think of the Tyrant, James?
Yeah, I think it's very nice in that it stabilizes you. The life gain's actually great. You're getting 2 cards. You're getting a 7/7 left behind. I think the point you make about castability is actually very relevant. Red green actually works pretty well for sneak attack because it's 5 mana essentially to use. Accelerating into the sneak can be really good, and if you're doing the red green thing with elves, then you really want sneak targets that are castable, right? When we're speaking about the backup plan, how else you getting the creatures into play? A red green deck, the other mode is just we're casting the creatures, right? We're playing a red green ramp deck. But sometimes my red-green ramp deck does this way more powerful explosive thing, where on turn 5 I start sneaking in Vaultborn Tyrants and the like. The other nice thing about Vaultborn Tyrant as well, with sneak attack specifically, you don't get this with Through the Breach, but you sneak in a Vaultborn Tyrant, then the next thing you sneak in is probably triggering the Vaultborn Tyrant. So you're getting 100%. More value, more life that way.
No, it's very strong. Yeah, I do like the Vaultborn Tyrant. But let's keep it going. At number 2, James, I've leaned into the potential of chaining things together, because at number 2 I have Grizzlebrand, and I think sneak attack is actually really the deck where Grizzlebrand shines, because the point of it is you sneak attack it in, you're going to be hitting them for a bunch of damage, but also you can just draw the card straight away if you have the life, and then if you have red mana spare, you can just win the game on the spot because you can just dump your hand into play with sneak attack. It can be exceptionally strong when this comes together, and just drawing 7 cards and filling up your hand and putting more things into play. Like, sneak attack really does change the way that you're thinking about your deck. And also, especially, and we did also talk about Through the Breach in this section as well. Just Through the Breaching this into play to help set up your next turn as well, or the rest of the game, is nice as well. So I think Grizzlebrand is very premium when you're combining it with a sneak attack. What do you think of that, James?
Yeah, Grizzlebrand is great. It gets you a ton of cards. You'll get the life back, so you're not so worried about paying the life. If you have sneak, you can put the more cards in play. As you said, it also, if you have animates in your deck, it's going to dig you to a reanimation effect. Then end of turn, when Grizzlebrand goes away, you can just bring it back next turn with reanimate. So yeah, really, really powerful one to sneak in for sure.
And then at number 1, James, I've gone for Big Mummy Emrakul. Again, just because hitting them for 5, it'll be a kind of pattern with some of these, is if you can hit them out of nowhere with a 15/15 flying annihilator squiddly fish, it's normally pretty good. Again, similarly with the instant speed Reanimator effects, if you can hit them with this and you can get into play, you will normally just win that game. Especially as sneak attack leaves you live for hitting them with other things. Like what we mentioned with instant speed Reanimator, like, oh, they could end up being on 3 damage or 3 life or something like that. Like with sneak attack in this, they're going to be sacking most of their board. So it means whatever you sneak attack in next, you just need anything with power and toughness, and you're going to win that game. I think, for me, Emrakul goes above Griselbrand just because Griselbrand will dig you to the next thing to win the game, but Emrakul will just win the game.
Yeah, for sure. It's really hard for them to beat Sneak Emrakul. There are some instant speed ways to remove an Emrakul before, like you can Solitude an Emrakul, for example. Because it only has protection from coloured spells, not abilities. But it's really niche. And I like Emrakul as a number 1. I think you could have a debate between Emrakul and Archon and Griselbrand. I think they're all great for sneaking. But I like Emrakul quite a lot as the first pick. It's not many people survive an Emrakul hit.
Exactly, and when we're doing these lists, I'm just realizing it's worth kind of mentioning, like, we are talking about kind of like we're talking about the best of the best. Like, these are the top 5 in all 20,000 cards of Magic, and kind of like, if you think Emrakul is too strong for your cube, then just go down 1 or go down 2. Like I don't run Emrakul or Griselbrand in my cube, but I have Sneak Attack and I have Animate Dead. I run Vaultborn, Tyrant, World's Way Worm, and Atali. Like you can tailor them. We're giving you the top list, but it doesn't mean that, oh, I want to run Sneak Attack, therefore I have to get myself an Emrakul. If your cube doesn't support it, then don't jam it in. But kind of like we are trying to give the best possible here.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, what else can you do with the cards in your cube, right? If your cube doesn't have any other way to use Emrakul Sneak Attack, then maybe you want to look at something like Vaultborn Tyrant instead, because it's a way more versatile card. Emrakul is not a card you can realistically put on the stack. It's not a card you can animate dead. So if you don't have any other things to do with it, yeah, sure, maybe do a Vaultborn Tyrant. But if you think Emrakul's doing other cool stuff in your cube, it is, I think, very reasonable to say it might be number 1 for sneaking. It's certainly right up there. But yeah, there's a ton of great cards for sneak. That's kind of what makes it good, right? Woodfall Primus, I think, is one we didn't mention. That's also excellent here. That's the 5/5 with persist, where when it ETBs, you blow up a non-creature permanent. So you're gonna sneak it in, blow up a land or a planeswalker or whatever. End of turn, you sack it, it comes back, you blow up another one, and you get to keep the creature.
No, very strong. Like, Sneak Attack might be one of my favorite cards in all of Magic, just because it changes the way you play a game of Magic for the better, in my point of view. Anyway, I think it's really fun.
I also really enjoy the games where you're sneaking with non-busted stuff as well.
Just giving your creatures haste is good.
Yeah. I remember having a lot of fun with sneaking in a Venser and then Caracasing it back to my hand. Ooh. Just doing that over and over
again. Vibes.
Yeah, nice. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah. Actually, I guess I probably should have... I realised I probably should have mentioned Palinchron, actually, because that is infinite mana.
Ooh, Palinchron is spicy. Yeah.
Palinchron is a 7-mana flying illusion that when it comes into play, you untap 7 lands. So this very... and then it has 2 blue, return this creature to its owner's hand. So with that and Sneak Attack, as long as you have more than, I think, 5 lands, if my math is right, if you have 6 lands in play or more, then you make infinite mana. That used to be a kind of a cool Storm win con, I think, in some queues. But so I didn't mention Palinchron because I didn't think about it until we were recording, actually. But that would probably make a list. I don't think Palinchron gets in cubes in general because it's only really that cool interaction with Sneak Attack. But if you're pushing specifically Sneak Attack, I think Palinchron could get on this. But just in terms of stuff with other parts of the cube, I don't think it's as good as it used to be. Yeah,
I don't think Palinchron should be on any list for top 5 most powerful things to do. Yeah. But top 5 coolest things to do a Sneak Attack, absolutely. And there is some other stuff you can do with Palinchron with mana doublers. So if you have, say, Heartbeat of Spring, where you're doubling your mana, you can just... It's 6-7 to play, 4 to return. So if you have enough lands, you can, and they're all tapping for double mana, you can come out mana positive.
That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah.
It's tough. It's not for the most powerful cubes, but it is a lot of fun.
It is a vibe.
Not a combo I'd recommend trying to execute on Magic Online. You will time the hell out, but it's good vibes, you know.
No. Oh, very cool. Talking of vibes, let's talk about Flash, James. Flash is a really cool card. I'll read Flash because it is, in theory, like the deck is built around the card Flash, but it does overlap with a bunch of other things that we're going to be that we have talked about or we're going to be talking about. So Flash is 1 and a blue for an instant. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you do, sacrifice it unless you pay its mana cost reduced by 2. Spoilers, you don't do that. You just put the creature into play and then it dies straight away. Like, the idea of this originally was to just give a creature, like, let you play a creature at instant speed. Woo, hooray. But that's not how we're playing this, James. How are we playing Flash and how is it broken?
Yeah, Flash is probably the most broken card we're going to talk about today, to be honest. So what you're going to do, you're going to put your giant thing into play that has either an incredibly powerful ETB or dies trigger. You don't pay the mana. It goes straight to the graveyard. You don't care. So, for example, Flash, Worldspine Worm. Put in Worldspine Worm, don't pay. You just pay 2 mana, get 3 5/5s. I think in a cube where it's fully supported, Flash is almost always like one of the most powerful cards in that cube. The reason is that you just don't have to do any work. Like, you just have to have Flash and the target in hand and 2 mana, and that's it. Compare this to Sneak Attack. Sure, you're not getting an attack in, but it's 2 mana versus 5. It's night and day. Compare this to versus Reanimate. Like, Reanimators can be busted, but you have to do way more work to make Reanimator busted because you have to get the creature in the yard. And Flash is I just need 2 mana and the creature, and Flash is going to be insane. If I see a Flash early in a cube where it's spotted, I'm going to take it. I'm going to prioritize Flash creatures and tutors for Flash, basically. Because Flash, you kind of don't have to be that committed. You can just put in you can put in your control deck like a Flash, a Mystical Tutor, a Worldspine Worm, and a Woodfall Thymus, and that's a great package. It just has such ridiculous potential to like do the thing on turn 2, which very few of these other ones do, right? Like turn 1, you shoot up for missing piece, and then you just go Flash, Woodfall Thymus. I blow up your 2 lands on turn 2. And I have a 5/5. It's pretty obscene. It works well with a ton of the creatures in cube. I think we're going to do the top 5 list, but I think there's 2 which are sort of I have slightly above the rest. But honestly, there's a ton of things which are great with Flash. If you take it early, it's hard to properly miss on Flash creatures, I've found. It's really like uniquely powerful effect, this one. Also just goes great in a deck with a bunch of these other effects, right? Obviously with the sneak, you want all the same creatures because you're getting VTB trigger and the death trigger in the same way. Great with Reanimates because the creature ends up in your graveyard. A lot of the good Flash creatures will see you more cards, so they'll like dig you to the Reanimate. There really aren't many downsides about Flash. The one thing I will say, which I think people sometimes have misconceptions about how it works rules-wise, the creature dies as part of the spell resolving. So it's never in play for you to, for example, activate your Gristlebrand. So Flash doesn't work with that.
Or for that, like, again, they couldn't like path to exile it to stop it dying or something like that.
Exactly. It's already in the graveyard once that spell has resolved.
No, that makes sense. Kind of my choices with this are kind of based on the fact that it's similar to Sneak Attack, but we're not getting the attack in. So that is important for me. We're not getting the attack in, so we want the ETB or the death. And I've put at number 5 a card we haven't talked about yet. I wanted to talk about it at some point, so I think this is a good place for it because I do think it's good in this deck. And this also can allow Flash to appear in lower powered cubes because Flash is very strong, but it's often defined by what you're cheating in. At number 5, I've gone for Triplicate Titan. This is a 9-mana 9/9 with it's an artifact creature golem with flying, vigilance, and trample. That importantly has, when it dies, create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token with flying, a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token with vigilance, and a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token with trample. So for 2 mana, you are getting 9 power and 9,000 toughness worth of stats over 3 bodies. You can flash on turn 2. This is a very strong thing to do on turn 2. It's not. I don't think it's the most broken, but I think as a place, I think it deserves a place on this list because it is good, and also this does work in this is. Triplicate Titan, I think, works in all but one of the cheat decks that we're going to be talking about today. In terms of, it is a good card. It's always a 7 out of 10. I feel it's like Worldspine Worm and like Emrakul's are like 10s, but only in certain decks. For me, Triplicate Titan is like a 6 or a 7 in every deck we've mentioned so far. I think that is why we need to talk about it, and it's why it's on my flash list.
Yeah, for sure. It's the fact that it's even artifacts as well gives it more utility with some of the other things she into play. And as you say, it's not the best in any of these lists, but it's sort of solid in all of them. I'd say with Flash, if you're really good at doing the thing early, it's really good. Like on turn 2, 3/3/3s will win you the game most of the time. If you don't put it together until the mid game, they can probably beat 3/3s, right? Mm-hmm. With some keywords. So yeah, I think it's great if you get it out early. The fact it doesn't scale as well as some of the others means it's not right at the top. But yeah, I think it's good.
Nice. Another one that is also ridiculously cheap as a Magic card. And my number 4, I've gone for Torsten, Founder of Benalia. Torsten is 7 mana. It is a 7/7 legendary creature human soldier. When it enters, reveal the top 7 cards of your library, put any number of creature and or land cards from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And when it dies, you create 7 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So why I like this is because for 2 mana, remember, for 2 mana, you are drawing around 4 cards, realistically, 3 to 4 cards, and you're putting 7 power and toughness into play. Yes, across 7 bodies, but for 2 mana, I think Torsten is a very strong Magic card, and it's for me it's a unique one that really works well in the Flash deck because like for Torsten to be good, it needs to enter and die. I would rather have 7 1/1s than 1 7/7 oddly because it's less likely to like it's less as good with removal. It works like if you can Anthem or anything like that, then it gets very scary. I quite like Torsten. What do you think about this one, James?
Yeah, I think Torsten's great with Flash. It's 7 1/1s will be great on turn 2, but also if you find it later, they sure keep you alive, against the creature decks. And then this just stocks up your hand again. It'll find you more big creatures. It'll find you some lands. It does a lot of great things, Torsten. But there are ones I like slightly more, but Torsten is very, very good. It's and I think Flash is the main reason to put Torsten in the cube.
I agree.
It's fine to sneak or through the breach, but it's medium to reanimate, but excellent.
Yeah. I don't really want to reanimate Torsten. I like instant speed oddly because it exiles, doesn't it? So yeah, sneak attack and flash, and I personally do find that this kind of flashy deck is often like a teamer deck that's kind of green for ramp, blue for flash, and a card we'll get onto in a little bit, and red for sneak attacks. That's kind of generally how I kind of see it. The general cheat deck often tends to be teamer basically. But let's move on to my next one. I think you might have this one a little bit higher, but I put this at number 3. At number 3, I've gone for Woodfall Primus. This is where I put this lad. This is a 8 mana 6/6 with trample. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-creature permanent, and it has persist. So the persist will mean that it comes in, you get the ETB, you destroy target non-creature permanent. The flash will then make it die. It'll come back into play as a 5/5, and then you get that ETB trigger again. This on turn 2, blowing up both their lands, terrifying. They probably don't come back from that actually. But this is quite a classic cheat target actually, James. Like Woodfall Primus has been in cubes since It was printed in Shadowmoor, which was 2008. It's probably been in Cube since then, and it's probably got better with the kind of resurgence of Flash as an archetype. But what do you think of Woodfall Primus, James? Would you have it higher on your list out of interest, or?
Yeah, I have this in my top 2 for Flash. I think this is probably the other ones when we talked about, with the artifact, for example, like, 3/3/3s will win you the game on turn 2. Like, yeah, normally will, but they're still playing a game of Magic, right? If you flash in Woodfall Primus on turn 2, they're not playing a game of Magic. They have no lands, and you have a 5/5. That's the crucial thing, right? Is that they're down mana, and it actually leaves the body behind. So you've killed their mana, and you have something to kill them with. You really don't need to do much else in that game a lot of the time. It kind of solos in a way which a lot of the other ones don't. Yeah. And even when you do it later, you still get the body. Like, killing lands is still relevant for most of the game. Plus, you get to kill, there's just a lot of non-creature permanents you care about in Cube, You can kill their planeswalkers, you can kill their enchantments. It's, I like this one a lot. And it transfers over to a lot of the other archetypes really well, right? Like, it's good to sneak, it's decent to reanimate. It's, only good things to say about Woodfall Primus, really. This is, it's honestly one I take a lot higher than I used to in Cube because...
no, that's fair. Yeah.
It's a bit like Triplicatize. It sort of works with all the different ways you can cheat stuff into play, but I think Flash is where it's at its absolute best.
No, I'd agree. I think, Flash is generally one of these archetypes that I think we probably should have been running in high power level cubes for the past 20 years. And it's only really with kind of like some redundant pieces being printed in terms of targets that has kind of meant that people are running it a bit more now. So my number 2, and it's for similar reasons why I had it quite high on my sneak attack list, I've gone for Vaultborn Tyrant, purely because you are getting 2 6/6s out of it. You again, you're drawing cards. You are setting up your further game plan. I do agree that on turn 2, I think Woodfall Primus is better. I think later on in the game, I think there's an argument that maybe Vaultborn Tyrant might be that little bit better for you. I think if you don't get the perfect nut draw with Flash, I think Vaultborn Tyrant probably, for me, is going to be slightly further ahead later on in the game. But yeah, I would fully concede that 2 and 3 could be swapped around on this list. What do you think about Vaultborn Tyrant specifically in Flash, James? We talked about it in Sneak Attack, but specifically in Flash, how do you like it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Because I guess, obviously on turn 2, killing a land is way better than drawing a card. There is some point in the game where that flips around, right? On turn 10, you'd rather draw a card than kill a land. So I guess it depends how many of the non-creature things they have you want to kill, etc., etc. Yeah, I mean, Flash Woodfall Primus will win a lot of games. I guess the downside to this versus Flash Vaultborn Tyrant will win a lot of games. I guess the only downside to it is that if they kill the token, you're up some cards, but you've not like given them that knockout blow like you have with some of the other ones. But we're splitting hairs about incredibly powerful plays here. And
we're also at a point. I think there's room for all of these cards.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, every card we mentioned so far, like apart from, like every card on the Flash list, I'm running in my cube right now. So, including the last one, and it is Worldspine Worm, as you mentioned, James. Putting a 15's worth of 15 power and toughness into play on turn 2, terrifying. Worldspine Worm is also a card that's been around for a while, but has really seen a resurgence in Cube now that we've kind of really got our hands on the Flash deck. And it's also got reprinted a bunch, so it's nice and cheap now, which is great. Worldspine Worm is actually only about £2, and I don't think Flash is that expensive as well because it's also been banned in every format known to man.
Yeah, checks out.
Yeah, I'm assuming Worldspine Worm was the number 1 on in your heart as well, James?
Yeah, absolutely. 3/5/5s is great for most of the game. You can, even if you're not putting this together until later, 3/5/5s kills them so unbelievably quickly. Yeah, nothing but positive words about Woodfall Primus, really. Yeah, also great to sneak. Can't reanimate it, but such is life. There is a nice trick you can do with necromancy, specifically with Woodfall Primus, where because necromancy is weird in that you can cast it at instant speed, but it's normally not good to because you'll sack it in your next cleanup step, and it doesn't gain haste, so you can never attack with it. It's not very good. But if you go Flash Worldspine Worm and the 3/5/5s weren't good enough, you can you can necromancy it in response to a trigger, go to end step, it dies, you get 3 more 5/5s.
It's so mean. It's so mean. They're already dead, my boy. Jesus. Oh yeah, that's very strong. Yeah. Necromancy is a very cool one. It's a weird one. I have it in my cube because of it is weird and cool, but yeah, that's a very disgusting interaction.
Yeah, I really like that list for Flash. There was one other one I wanted to flag up, which wouldn't make my top 5, but I think it interacts with Flash in a way better way than people realize at the moment, because it's quite new. Metamorphosis Fanatic Flash actually works really well, because this is the 6 mana black card, which you can miracle for 1 black. It's a lifelinker. When it ETBs, you return something from the graveyard and put a lifelink counter on it. Because Flash kills the creature as part of the spell resolving, that's going to be before, if you flash in the Metamorphosis Fanatic, the Fanatic will already be in the graveyard when the trigger goes on the stack. You can actually return itself with its own trigger. And then obviously you'll get another trigger when it ETBs for a second time, and then you get something else back. Like, I wouldn't put it in the top 5 because for that to work, you need something else in the graveyard. But these are cards you'll often put in the same deck, and that's definitely an interaction that is worth knowing about because it plays out really well.
I did not know that. That is very cool. Yeah, that's sick, actually. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm glad that card's also come down a little bit in price because maybe I will now either proxy or pick one up. Yeah, that is sweet. All right, next up, let's talk about Show and Tell and Eureka. So I'll read them both. So Show and Tell, 2 in a blue, sorcery. Each player may put an artifact, creature, enchantment, or land card from his or her hand onto the battlefield. And Eureka is 4 mana for a sorcery. Starting with you, each player may put a permanent card from his or her hand onto the battlefield. Repeat this process until no one puts a card onto the battlefield. So these are just good at taking a spell from your hand and putting it into play. With Eureka, you can do this multiple times. It can be quite dumb. Also, proxy Eureka's, dear God, it's an expensive magic card. James, what are we looking at when we're thinking of showing and telling? Like Show and Tell does get a bit of a bad rep in Powered Cube. I quite like it, but I do see that kind of like in an environment where everyone has broken things, it can be a bit of a trap because effectively your opponent gets to attack first with their thing. But talk to me about Show and Tell and Eureka, James. Kind of like, what are we looking for in terms of creatures, and kind of how do they play out, basically?
Yeah, for sure. I think we're thoroughly into the proceed with caution part of the episode here. Stuff can go really badly wrong for you when you cast these cards, even when you think you have a good setup for it. But having said that, it can also do some really powerful stuff. So really high risk strategy, but it can be really sweet as well. With Show and Tell specifically, I'm really looking for stuff that is going to have a huge impact this turn. I don't want to be planning to pass the turn, let them attack me, including with the thing that I let them put into play for free, and hoping I can still be in a good place to attack back. It doesn't play out very well. So I want to be doing stuff this turn. So I'm looking at stuff like, we're not limited to creatures here, right? We include artifacts. So I'm looking at stuff like Portal to Phyrexia, I think, is a really good one. It's where they have to sack 3 creatures when it enters, and then I can get creatures back in my upkeep. That's great. Bolus of Citadel can be really good here, especially this I like in Storm decks, actually. Show and Tell, Bolus of Citadel. You can quite often win the game the turn you play that in Storm. If we're looking at creatures, Archon of Cruelty is decent, because if you do that onto an empty board, then you can make them sack the creature they put in. But obviously, there is still stuff that can go wrong there. Show and Tell with something like Emrakul, for example, I kind of think is I think it's I think they're just going to get to attack first. They have too many ways that are alive to deal with Nemrical. With Eureka, you really want to be putting lots of stuff in, because if you're only putting one thing in, it runs into the same issues as Show and Tell. So a lot of it's just about density. Special mention to like Vaultborn Tyrant, though, I think is really cool with Eureka, because you put that in first and then the subsequent ones all trigger it. So yeah, high risk, high reward. That's great. That says.
No, definitely. I think a lot of mine. I'll get onto my stint in a moment, but yeah, I think to an extent I have kind of thought of like the potential downsides of it. Kind of like basically, if I'm playing Show and Tell, I want something that works well with it. So like answering what your opponent's putting in is part of it as well. But my first one doesn't have any of that. My first one is Bolas' Citadel at number 5, because this card is sweet. It is 3 black for a legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, put pay life equal to its mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. You may pay life equal to its mana cost. You may pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost, and you can tap it and sack 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. So this is a phenomenal card just to get on turn 3, because it will set you up for the rest of the game. It being able to draw you into potentially answering what your opponent is doing is nice in those kind of decks as well. And this just leads to very strong and very powerful turns. That's kind of why I've got it at number 5. Some of mine are also actually engines. 2 more of mine are engines, and I've actually kind of combined them together. But I think just it's very cool and it's a very strong thing to do with Show and Tell. Is like you don't need to put in your big creature. You can just put in a game-winning engine that will just power you through to the rest of the game, and that's kind of where Bolas' Citadel is.
Yeah, I really like Show and Tell Citadel. Other reason is that Bolas' Citadel doesn't care about you untapping with it, like at all, right? Because obviously it's not a creature, so it doesn't care about summoning sickness, but also it doesn't really care about whether your lands are untapped, right? Because you're playing with spells for free. One thing I will say is it's slightly better sometimes if you can wait to do it until turn 4, and you can do it and have a land drop to give. So that means you don't just get blanked the first time you see a land on top of your library. But yeah, I really like it, especially in Storm, because it's great with the top deck tutors. It's amazing, but also Tendrils, it actually works really well, because that gives you the life back to keep going.
No, very cool. Yeah, if you can play the house, play the house. All right, my next one, James, is a card that has not been released yet. Go with me on this journey. We have, for me at number 4, Summon Bahamut. Bahamut. This is from Final Fantasy. It is 9 generic mana for a 9/9 enchantment creature saga dragon with flying. We will be covering this on the set review probably next episode. But it is a creature that's also a saga. Chapter 1, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Chapter 2 is that again. Chapter 3 is draw 2 cards, and Chapter 4 is this creature deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. So why I like this is because in theory this comes in and answers what your opponent is putting in, unless they're putting in a land, but in which case you're kind of fine with that because you have a 9/9 flyer. You're doing that twice. You're removing their best 2 things. You're then going to draw 2 cards, and by that, these saga creatures we do have to have a conversation within the set review, but kind of like because this has 4 chapters. So this creature does get sacked after the 4th chapter. But it's a 9/9 flyer, so you only need to hit them twice, and you can attack on chapter 2 and 3, and then in theory you'll have time to put something else into play to then blow them up with its 4th ability. I think this card is actually quite spicy. But this is an enchantment creature, so it does work with anything that kind of, like it does work with the other like ways of cheating in creatures. Like this could oddly be quite a cool Reanimator target as well. But Show and Tell is where I specifically wanted to mention this card because it answers, or I'm pretty sure it answers the thing they're putting in as well, and I think that's quite cool.
Yeah, this seems kind of sick. Yeah, I guess similar idea to like the Portal Archon stuff, right? Initially you kill their thing and then you get a ton of value later. I like it. I feel like if we get to the 4th chapter, they're always already dead.
Yes.
But yes,
very much so.
It looks powerful. I like it. You could channel it out as well. That's pretty spicy.
It is colorless. We do like that. Yeah. This is one I did want to mention because it's brand new at time of recording. I think this was spoiled like 2 days ago. And if I'm waking up early in the morning to do to do hot takes on these, I might as well talk about some of them. But yeah, I think this card is sweet. All right, at number 3, I do have Archon, again for the similar reasons, but I think just because at any point early in the game, if you can get an Archon of Cruelty out, it'll just take over the game. And you are answering what they're putting in as well as their board. Any notes on Archon in Show and Tell Eureka decks, James, or is it kind of just as we kind of think about it?
Yeah, I think if we're show and telling a creature, this is one of the best ones. Eureka seems great. I like it.
All right, at number 2, I have a joint one. I've kind of cheated here. This is my favorite thing to do with a show and tell in Cube, and that is to put in either an Omniscience or a Dream Halls. Omniscience is a 10-mana spell it's a 10-mana enchantment that lets you pay spells from your hand without paying their mana cost. And Dream Halls does a similar thing, but you can discard a card of the same color to cast a spell from your hand. Basically, this is like the engine thing that Bolas Citadel is, but on steroids. Like, these are great with, like, yes, you do in theory need draw 7s to really make these go off, but like the most fun limited decks I've had are show and telling in one of these on turn 3 and then just going to town and having a great time. Like, is this the most optimal? Maybe not. Maybe I should have reconsidered that for this list, but I had to mention these because I think these are really, really fun.
No, I like it. I think if you're show and telling, honestly, this is what you need to be up to, because this, again, doesn't care if you untap for it, right? It does everything it is going to do right away. I like it.
Nice. And then number 1, I do have Portal to Phyrexia. This is where I put it, because you are answering what they're doing, and it's just such an engine. Like, this is also a card that you can play with a show and tell when you're behind, which can be quite important, because you're not always going to get that show and tell on turn 3. Like, this lets you cheat it in later in the game, and yeah, it can answer their board and then just give you that slow, grindy value, bringing back your creature. Portal to Phyrexia is 9 generic mana for an artifact. When it enters, each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures, and at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. When this is in play, it does just start taking over a game. It's kind of quite scary. So that was my choice for show and tell in Eureka. Kind of like, are there any obvious ones to you that I've missed, James?
No, I think that was a really good list for show and tell. I guess for Eureka, I'd put Vault-Born Tyrant on the list because of the thing of you get the extra triggers. But no, I think I like it. I think show and tell out of these two is definitely. I mean, it's not easy still, but I think it's a little less ridiculous to set up than Eureka, because Eureka you need like 3 things. Well, it's good. But yeah, no, I think if you're going to show and tell, these are good things to do with it, for sure.
Nice. There are probably some like Ugin or Khan Planeswalkers that would kind of do work in these as well, because you can cheat those in. We've had the lovely thing of both Scryfall and Gatherer are both down at time of recording, so that's really helping out the episode. But we'll carry on, because next up we have Tinker. Tinker is a bit different because it requires artifacts. So Tinker as a deck or as a card is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. At the time you play Tinker, sacrifice an artifact. I'm reading the card that will have been errated slightly. When you do that, you search your library for an artifact card and put that artifact into play. Shuffle your library afterwards. James, for you, for Tinker to work, we obviously need cheap artifacts in our deck, and we need a big top end. What kind of things are you thinking about when you take a Tinker, or kind of what is the game plan when you have a Tinker? Because Tinker is a broken Magic card. Like, it's quite rightly banned in Commander and is really, really strong. But there's a lot of strong artifacts out there, James. What are you thinking about when you're tinkering?
Yeah, you really want... So, yeah, firstly, you need a lot of cheap artifacts because you... this does literally nothing if you don't have an artifact in play. But if you do, you kind of just need... You want, like, at least one really, really good high-impact thing to get. Hopefully you have 2, or if you don't have 2, you at least want something decent to tinker for as a backup plan. I really wouldn't recommend going with just like 1 9-drop and then everything else is cheap, because if you draw the 9-drop, you can have a really bad time with the tinker.
It sucks when that happens, yes.
Yeah, for real. But yeah, if you can pull it off, Tinker's an absolute powerhouse of a Magic card. And the other thing is, right, it's really hard to interact with because they can't kill all the artifacts to stop you casting it. And then often the artifacts are getting their money like on the way in. They don't really have good opportunities to remove them before they're really getting going. So yeah, love Tinker. It's very powerful and cohesively goes in a very powerful strategy, right? This is pretty distinct from the other cheating stuff we've talked about, which has been sort of creature based, and the whole thing the deck is doing is cheating something massive into play. Tinker goes quite cohesively in your Tolarian Academy Urza type decks, which can also just generate an obscene amount of mana and cast the giant thing that way. So yeah, it's a great explosive piece in a already very powerful deck.
Exactly, and kind of the cards I've gone for are ones that generally see play in cubes. It is worth mentioning there are just a bunch of very broken artifacts. Kind of like I know in like your cube, James, you have like Paradox Engine. Like that can be a very strong combo card. It doesn't see play in most cubes, but like that is a fantastic Tinker target if that's something that you're doing in your cube. So like I haven't gone too deep on like just like broken artifacts. I have kind of kept it within the realm of what kind of sees cube play. So my number 5 again is Brothers of Citadel. Again, just tinkering up your engine piece, I think is very strong. I do like it. At number 4, we have a new one we haven't mentioned yet. At number 4, I have Inkwell Leviathan. It is 9 mana for a 7/11. Artifact creature Leviathan. It has Island Walk, Trample, and Shroud. Why I like this is because this is miserable for your opponent to deal with. Like it's, if it resolves, you've basically got this on lockdown. I have turned 1 this with a Black Lotus before, and yeah, the Black Lotus was doing a lot of work in the Tinker plan, but getting one of these into play on turn 1, and then my opponent on their turn 1 playing a Volcanic Island as their land drop return is like, right, well, that was easy. Like,
I like that you had Black Lotus Tinker in your opening hand, and your takeaway was Inkwell Leviathan's busted. Nice.
I am a Timmy, James. but like, just as a Tinker target, I think this is still very strong. It's also a very cheap Magic card, and Tinker is quite cheap as well. And again, this lets you tailor the power level of Tinker to suit a cube. But I think Inkwell, like sometimes not everything has to be an ETB. Sometimes with these effects, and like Inkwell Leviathan, like it's not as good as like Emrakul, but it is a thing of like if it's in play, it will win you the game because it's so hard to deal with. And I think there is still a place for that in cubes, and so that's why Inky is on my list at number 4.
Yeah, Inkwell seems a really nice thing to include if you want Tinker to not just end the game absolutely immediately. Like they're going to have a really tough time trying to remove it from play. I think the counterplay to Inkwell is you try and erase it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so it's a powerful thing to think for.
At number 3, similar to my last list, I have Portal to Phyrexia. Again, just getting this out early, answering everything your opponent has done up to that point, and then you just have this engine. You basically, you've won the game. It's just going to take you a couple of turns. Like you have inevitability when a Portal to Phyrexia comes out early. At number 2, I've gone for Sundering Titan. Again, just blitzing their lands is phenomenal. Especially as mana bases are getting greedier. Triomes, you love it when the opponent fetches for a Triome on turn 1 and you know that there's a Sundering Titan in your deck. Like you are going to get them so badly. I think Sundering Titan is phenomenal in these type of decks. I think it's great. And then my number 1 does work in this deck. My number 1 is Blightsteel Colossus. This is where I think Blightsteel Colossus is potentially king. It is a 12 mana, 11/11 artifact creature golem with trample, infect, and indestructible, and it has the if it would be put into a graveyard thing that doesn't work with instant speed Reanimator, but we don't care with flashes coming into play. It's big, it's tramply, it's indestructible. If they don't have anything, they just die on attacks because 11 poison is more than 10 poison. So I think Blightsteel is best for that. Like again, from a power level point of view, I don't have Blightsteel Colossus in my queue because I think it is one for the highest power level. What do you think of that list, James? Kind of like a lot of the cards we kind of talked about before, but there's a couple on there that weren't that are new specifically for Tinker. I'm assuming there might just be some non-creatures I haven't mentioned, but kind of like, does anything stand out to you in terms of like an obvious include or it on that list?
I think I definitely wouldn't have Blightsteel that high.
Okay.
I think if you're running Blightsteel, this is probably the best thing to do with it, but I kind of just think that card isn't that strong. The thing is, if I'm going to the effort of tinkering, I I don't really want something that they can just exile or bounce, and I didn't get any value out of it. Like a portal, even if they kill the portal, I edicted them 3 times. That's gonna catch me up a lot. With Blightsteel, there's a lot of bounce in these cubes. There's a lot of exile removal, and I just got nothing.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe if I have a Lightning Greaves in my deck for some reason, that's a nice combo because you can get the haste. But even then, there is also the issue, right? That if they just have a 2/2 in play, and then they kill it, then sure you have 9 infect, but there's nothing else in your deck that deals insects. Yeah, but it gives them another turn to remove it, right?
That's very fair.
I don't know. I think it's fine to tinker for. It's a perfectly respectable tinker target. But I certainly wouldn't have it above Portal to Phyrexia or Boils of Citadel personally.
Would you have it in your top 5? So do you think Inkwell is better than Blightsteel Colossus?
No, I think I would have it above Inkwell. Definitely below Citadel, Portal. Sundering Titan, I think, is better than it. I think, to me, that and Mere Battlesphere are on about the same level as tinker targets.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'd go with that. That's all good. Is there anything that I haven't added to the list that kind of you think needs to be on here, or is there anything what's your number 1 actually?
Portal is my number 1.
Cool.
I by a decent margin actually. I think just because it's because it has that really powerful ETB as well as the engine. It's even if they kill it, I'm kind of okay, and it's hard to kill because it's a non-creature artifact.
No, that's cool. No, that makes sense. All right, awesome. All right, we're keeping it colorless next with our next card. This is another card that's banned in more formats than I can count. And that is Channel. This is green for a sorcery. Until end of turn, anytime you could activate a mana ability, you may pay 1 life if you do add a generic to your mana pool. So with this, we're generally dumping a bunch of colorless mana into a spell. We can exchange life points for colorless mana. Obviously, we need to be able to cast double green, so you do generally end up to be in a green adjacent deck with this. James, talk to me about Channel. It's a very strong magic card. What are we doing when we're channeling?
Yeah, it's a really powerful magic card that is also kind of hard to use a lot of the time. Just because, right, it really needs to be any other color, Green is really tough because it's a combo card, and green doesn't give you any selection. And this doesn't actually play well with the castable big green creatures because say you want to cast a Vaultborn Tyrant with this, you then need 4 green mana. It's kind of difficult to use. Honestly, I think often the best channel decks I've had have been Channel's the only green card in the deck,
Yes, I can see
and
that.
You're Grixis with tutors and draw 7s and stuff, and then you just desperately try and find some tropical islands and breeding pools and stuff.
It's such an aggressively mana base, James. Grixis smashing double green. No, I can see it working though. One thing in Channel's favor though is that we are casting the spells, so you do get cast triggers. So some of the ones we mentioned earlier, which we don't get, on some of the big Eldrazi, we are going to get the cast triggers with them as well as any ETB. So that is a nice part of Channel. I'm going to mess with you, James. I'm keeping it old school, aggressively old school with my number 5. I'm not going Fireball. I am going to be smart and go with Banefire. Banefire is X and a red. It deals X damage to any target, and if X is 5 or more, this spell can't be countered and the damage can't be prevented. We could have gone Fireball. I think I have run this in my cube in the past, and it was actually quite strong. That might just be the Channel part, but I do think it is something you need to mention when you talk about Channel. I don't think this gets seen in cube, in the highest power level cube much anymore, but this will kill people.
Sure kills people. Beware that sometimes it kind of costs 1 more mana than you think because if you're on 20 and they're on 20, you can't pay X as 20 or with the Channel mana because you run out of life points.
Oh, we're in powered cube, James. We'll have a Mox. It's fine.
Yeah. Of course. Channel Fireball can kill people. It's kind of a tough way to do it because, if they played a creature with power on turn 1 and hit you with it, then
That's fine.
it gets further away, and you're not really doing damage to them because you're playing your janky Channel Fireball deck. But no, it's cool. I like it. It. Maybe one for Live for Dream Cube.
Potentially. Like it. I didn't just want to put a bunch of colorless Eldrazi on.
I know what you mean. It's more fun than here's my 5 favorite Eldrazi Titan.
Yeah. At number 4 is where I have added Portal to Phyrexia. It's a big colorless thing. We know we like it. That's where I've added it. At number 3 to 1 is all Eldrazi. Number 3, I've gone for Ulamog the Infinite Gyre. This is an 11 mana 10/10. When you cast it, destroy target permanent. Indestructible, Annihilator 4, and then it shuffles in if it goes to your graveyard. At number 2, I've gone for Emrakul the Promise End. This is the second Emrakul. This one, when it's a 13 mana, 13/13 flying trample protection from instants, it costs 1 generic less to cast for each card type in your graveyard. That might actually make it cost. Actually, with Channel, that is 1 less. The Channel will be in your graveyard. We love that. And then it has, when you cast this spell, you gain control of target opponent during their next turns. Oh, you gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes next turn. I think it's just a nice, that is a very strong ETB effect, gaining control of their turn, on top of you getting this big 13/13. And then number 1, I have other big Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, because if you're going to channel something in, again, with any of these cheat effects, if it can be Emrakul, it might be number 1. That's kind of. I know I rattled through that quite quickly, but effectively, I think outside of Portal, the best things with Channel are big Eldrazi or X spells. X spells are quite good with it, and that's why I wanted to mention the Banefire Fireball thing. But as a I think for an outline of a list, this is good. Maybe there's some back and forth there, but what do you think of that, James? In terms of a rough idea of where we are with Channel.
Yeah, no, I like it. The issue of Channel has never been that there aren't big colorless things that win the game, right? It's that they need to do other stuff as well as be channeled out. Other ones I kind of like in that regard, which aren't as powerful as the Titans, but are in the cube for other reasons, like New Ugin, I think, is a pretty legit thing to channel.
I do like that, yeah. Oh, you are casting it as well. So, exactly. When you cast the New Ugin, is it exile target colored permanent or something like that?
Yes, I think so.
That's nice.
The other one I kind of like is Memory Jar.
Ooh, James, I like that. Yeah, because you jar and you have an active channel, so you can continue carrying on spells. That's nice.
Exactly. And normally Jar is the worst of the draw 7s, but with Channel it's actually the best because it costs all colorless mana. So that works pretty well. I don't think the nice thing to note with Channel is if you're running signets in your cube, the signets can get you back into colored mana post Channel, which is quite nice, and actually get 2 colored mana. So I can you can do some storm adjacent things with Channel as well, and that can be pretty good.
Yeah, Channel is a very broken magic, and it's also probably the cheapest cheat effect that we've mentioned, but that's just because it is banned everywhere, so nowhere apart from Cube can play it. Is it banned in Vintage as well, James?
No, you can channel in Vintage.
Can you?
You can channel. It's not very good in Vintage. I think it is restricted. Okay. It's legal in Canadian Highlander. I've done a lot of channeling in that format.
There we go. Yeah, that deck was.
I won't suggest Lich's Mirror for Cube.
Miserable.
I don't know what you're talking about. I had a great time.
You had all the time, James. That was the problem. After 20 minutes, you still have the same channel active. You're taking game actions.
Storm count is 46.
And now I'm going to have to bring Lich's Mirror up on screen as well. Marvelous. All right, but yeah. Generally, I think channel just works with like we put in Emrakuls and big. Yeah, and big Titans. But as James has mentioned, if you're running a high-powered other cube, you can just add channel, and it will just work with the big color stuff that's in there. Basically, that's kind of the busted thing about channel. But let's keep it going with a card that does care. It is a classic. When you think of cheat targets or things to cheat things into play, and that's Natural Order. So Natural Order is 2 green for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast Natural Order, sacrifice a green creature. Search your library for a green creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So this is kind of like the green creature version of Tinker. So obviously, you need green creatures. You're going to be like this. This used to be just the base green deck would only want this, but now as there's more Birds of Paradise effects that can fix your colors early, and there's more big creatures that have green in their pips. Natural Order has kind of got a bit of a second life because it's hitting more than just the classics, basically. What are you looking at when you're looking at including Natural Order in a cube deck, James? Like, are you just going for the classic? Like, are you just hoofing them, or are you? What are you considering when you're adding a Natural Order to a deck nowadays?
Yeah, I think the point about you can be more colors is a good one. I don't think we have to just be like, here's my 15 Elvish Mystics and a Kratos Behemoth, you know? You really do want some acceleration, some creature accelerants there. You do want some elves because it so naturally gives you the thing to sacrifice. It's not a big cost to sacrifice it because you've already got to your 4 mana and you get something giant. But if you're going for Kratos, you really need to have like a ton of that stuff, and it often ends up where like that's kind of all your deck does, and if they disrupt it, then it's just bad. I kind of prefer it in a deck where you're like, I'm green and a bunch of other colors, but I'm base green and I've got like a Birds of Paradise and a Hierarch and a Sylvan Caryatid. And then you can go and get something like an Atraxa, for example, which it might not kill them the turn it comes into play, but it sets you up great for a long game, and you didn't have to fill your deck with nothing but cheap green creatures which don't really contribute to much else in the game and don't interact with your opponent, you know?
No, 100%. I would agree with that. Right, so my list, and this is another one I'm very much open to having a conversation about. So number 5, I have gone for Woodfall Primus. It's just a big thing that can, like, it's a big classic thing. It can come in, it can't answer a creature, but it can answer something else that they're doing. If your opponent is doing Boros Citadel or Vault of Rexes, dumb stuff like that, this comes in and is a nice answer to that. And like, yes, we don't like when we talked about this previously. It was like, oh, if we sneak attack it in, we get to we get the double ETB because it's going to die. But if we're natural ordering for it, it means that we have a 6/6 that if our opponent answers, and they're going to have to, otherwise it will kill them, we then get to trigger it again. So I think Woodfall Primus is a very solid card to be naturally ordering for in any power level of cube, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
At number 4, I've gone for Worldspine Worm, again, purely because of just the amount of power and toughness you're putting onto the board. Similar to Woodfall Primus is that, yes, in sneak attack and flash decks, it works because you are putting it in and you're getting the bodies over multiple things. But with Natural Order, you're getting a 15/15 with Trample that they have to answer 4 times. Basically, like it's going to go through 2 board wipes. That is very good. We like that.
It is good. I would say it's maybe worse than something like Sneaking for it because they can bounce it, right? They can Swords to Plowshares it. Death triggers aren't that reliable when you're not triggering it yourself. But it's certainly a powerful card, and if it works with other things in your deck, then absolutely it's a good thing to natural order for.
No, that's fair. At number 3, we have one that you talked me around of in our last set with you, James. I've gone for Ireni, the Song Unending. It is 5 and a Teamer, so 8 mana for a 10/10 legendary creature, Spirit Dragon. Flying, protection from white and black, and when it enters it deals X damage, divide as you choose among any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers your opponent control, where X is the number of lands you control. So why you talk me around on this is like, this isn't one that has to go in just the mono green deck. This is very much a very solid ETB effect that's going to answer something. And then the protection from white and black, like, yes, apart from bounce, this will protect it from everything that your opponents are throwing at it. And because it has a green pip in there, we can get it with a natural order. I think this is actually quite a nice one. And 10 power flyer will normally end games of Magic.
Yeah, for sure. Like white and black are the perfect creatures for it to have perfect colors for it to have protection from, right? Because red and green can just never answer this anyway. So then it's basically just blue bounce effect you're worried about.
No, I would agree. And number 2, this is where I've put the creator of Behemoth. 8 mana, 5/5 with haste, that when it enters, creatures you control gain trample and get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. I think specifically natural ordering for a Crater Hoof is still good in high power level cubes in 2025. The issue is more that if your deck doesn't do that, it's bad. If your mono green deck doesn't curve out in exactly that way, then it's trash. That's more the issue. I think specifically those 2 cards as a combination, I think is very, very strong. And more, I think you can build that deck where it doesn't have to be fully mono green, and I think that's still good. Like there is a cheat deck, like there is a cool cheat deck that probably exists that does stuff with with Torsten, or does stuff with is it Ant Queen? What's the flying ant one?
Hornet Queen.
Yeah, it does stuff with Hornet Queen. So it's kind of a tokeny deck, and you also have your Crater Hoof as well on top. Sometimes on this list, I have taken into account like the deck they go into. Like Vaultborn Tyrant has shown up a lot in these lists, and Vaultborn Tyrant is a great card to natural order for, because it's just generically good in decks, and it's a great cheat target. Crater Hoof Behemoth is only a good cheat target, and it's only with natural order. If I'm honest with you, you don't want to cheat it in with anything else. So I wanted to mention it, and on this list, I think it is deservedly high. But part of the point of this episode is to show you where things overlap, and a card is better if it overlaps with more decks and overlaps with more cheat effects. I think Crater Hoof is high on this list, but I think it's dreadful everywhere else. So kind of like, if your only cheat thing in your whole cube is natural order, then cool, you can run Hoof. But I'm hoping by doing this is showing you the kind of like, yes, it's good individually, but it's not great in the grand scheme of a cube, because a cube is multiple things.
Yes, for sure. Obviously, it requires you to have more creatures in play than the other ones do. Like, you can't be sacrificing your only creature to go and get a Crater Hoof Behemoth. But it is the iconic thing to do with a natural order, and it will still win some games. The question is, will your deck win games consistently enough when you don't have natural order?
No, very, very true, very true. And that's kind of why my number 1 is Atraxa Grand Unifier. We went over it earlier, but it does have a green pip in there. While Crater Hoof is great in the mono green deck, Atraxa is great in any deck that's cheating things into play. Like, you could a Golgari graveyardy self-melee deck that has a bit of Reanimator could very easily run a natural order to cheat in an Atraxa. It fits perfectly, and it does everything that Atraxa does in the reanimation decks. It's a big threat that can win you the game, and it draws you more things to help win you the game. It can draw you the removal spell. It can draw you the other reanimation spell. It's doing other bits in your deck that I think are quite helpful. So that's why I've got Atraxa at number 1. Kind of like, natural order is a sweet card, but there's an element of it has kind of dropped off a little bit. I still think it has a place in Cube, but that place is mainly because of cards like Atraxa and Areni being printed, to be honest with you. So what do you think of that list, James? What would you change? And thoughts on natural order in general?
Yeah, I really like that list, actually. Natural order, I think, listen, I wouldn't cut it because it's powerful and unique, and it's kind of just one slot, and you don't need to really add different stuff to support it. I think a lot of drafts it won't get run, but sometimes a good natural order deck does come together, and that's really cool. I'm very much in for, I will happily dedicate a slot to something that, like, 1 out of 10 drafts is the main thing your deck is doing, and is doing something really powerful and unique, even if it doesn't get run a bunch the rest of the time, you know? I think that's fine.
No, exactly. I also kind of realized I've gone for like top end impact type stuff, but like there are games of Magic where just natural ordering for a Primeval Titan will still be pretty good, or natural ordering for I don't want a questing beast actually, but you know what I mean, kind of like just getting something that will give you that value straight away and get attacked might also be pretty solid. But
yeah, I've definitely natural ordered for Titania value. I think nice. That was pretty good.
Yeah. To be fair, I have not even thought about it as like combo potential, but like there's a bunch of kind of land stuff you can do with Titania. Kind of like, are you ever tutoring for a Ramnap Excavator to do strip mine combos, James? Is that ever happening, or is that a bit too niche?
It will. It might come up sometimes. Like, I wouldn't put natural order in my deck to do that.
Yeah.
But if you already have the fast bond and the strip mine, then yeah, you do that. If you already have, if you're already set up for that combo, those things could exist in the same deck, and then there would be situations where that would come up and be good, right?
No, definitely. Yeah. I really like natural order as a card. It's kind of, it is starting to show its age, but I think it's still got a long way to go before we cut it.
Yes, for sure.
All right. We have a very broken magic card next, James. This is our last super broken ones, and then we're going to move on to some more budget options. But next up, we have Oath of Druids. It is an enchantment that says, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player chooses target player who controls more creatures than they do and is their opponent. This is very old magic card wording here. The first player may reveal cards on the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. If the first player does, that player puts that card onto the battlefield and all other cards revealed this way into their graveyard. So this effectively, if your opponent has more creatures in play than you, it does work. So it does work reversely as well. The player with least creatures in play on their upkeep gets to tutor up a creature from their deck and put it into play. James, what do we need to consider when we're building an Oath deck? It sounds like we don't want many creatures.
I love Oath of Druids so much, Dan. Like, I could talk for so long about Oath of, but I'm restraining myself. Oath of Druids is really sweet. Basically, what you want with Oath Druids, you don't want to be on like one or two creatures, because it does have the issue that you're milling all the cards until you hit a creature. So you deck yourself really quickly if you have a very small number of creatures. But you also don't want you want all your creatures to be good to hit when you're flipping Oath Druids, right? You really don't want to be oathing and hitting like an elf mystic. That would be a disaster. You also just don't want to be playing creatures early, because you don't want to draw your Oath of Druids and have more creatures in play than your opponent. So the decks where Oath Druids is actual best is like you're playing a Reanimator deck or a Eureka deck or something like this, and you have like 4 or 5 creatures in your deck and they all cost 6+ mana. Then it's going to be phenomenal, because whenever you draw it, you'll have no creatures in play. Your opponent probably has creatures because they're playing cube, and you just slam your Oath of Druids. If they don't, they have 1 turn to kill it. If they don't, you're putting something huge into play. That's amazing. The issue is that creatures are really good in cube now. So it's quite hard to not put any creatures in your deck that don't cost like 6 or more mana. And I will say that I think people are a little too cautious with this sometimes. Like, people be like, I'm playing this like Sultai Reanimator deck, and I really wanted to put Oath of Druids in it, but then I got this Psychic Frog. And that's fine. Yeah. Like, you can just put Psychic Frog and Oath of Druids in the same deck. Like, you'll oath into your Psychic Frog, that's fine. Like, sure, it would be better to oath into your Archon, but Psychic Frog's still a really good card. You're getting it for free. You'll get another flip next turn. Like, happy days. You've got to draw the line somewhere. Like, I wouldn't put like Elvish Mystic and Oath of Druids in the same deck, but just if you just aren't casting a lot of creatures early and all your creatures are pretty impactful when you hit them, Oath of Druids can be a pretty good card for you. Like I've definitely put, like a Baleful Strix and Oath of Druids in the same deck before, and it's fine. But yeah, every cheaper creature you put in, though, will make your Oath a little bit worse, because it means you're just less likely to hit one of your really big top-end cards. And you really do want to be like, 50% to say at least hit something expensive and cheat something big in. But yeah, Oath Druids does a lot of very cool stuff. There's also weird things where you can do where you like Oath of Druids and then Eternal Witness is the only creature in your deck, because it puts all the other cards you hit into your graveyard. Mm-hmm. And you get to e-whip back anything you hit and go from there. Like, maybe you have a Time Walk or something in your deck and you can take a bunch of turns. That stuff is really cool. There's a lot you can do with Oath, but it does have a lot of setup costs, because it's you just can't put it in your like 10 creature deck very often. It's kind of tough.
it's the kind of build run card you want to see early in pack 1, so you have enough time to kind of like take enough playables that get in the deck that aren't creatures, like interaction, counter magic, board wipes, and also planeswalkers. I'm assuming are quite good in an Oath deck, James. Kind of just like they're things that impact the board and can help keep things in play, but aren't necessarily hits for your Oath of Druids. And like one thing you mentioned about Eternal Witness is like I was briefly considering adding Nexus of Fate to this list, because if you have no creatures and Nexus of Fate, if you get enough mana, you will just take infinite turns. That's where you need the planeswalkers to really pop off, but that's not one for every cube. That is a bit niche. But let's kick off with my list. I think kind of like this is almost like the greatest hits, as it were. At number 5, I've gone for Vaultborn Tyrant, just because, again, for the reasons it's been on a bunch of other lists, I think it's just very good. It's a very solid, very good creature that, if you can change the play, will help win games, but it's also castable. It's also just works. It works with everything that the deck wants, and it will help draw you cards as well. But actually, before I go on to this one, like, how do you think about Vaultborn in a Oath of Druids deck, James? Do you like it?
Yeah, I think it's very solid. Yeah, if you get multiple Oath triggers, you'll get more triggers on the Vaultborn. That's nice, and you often, when you have Oath going, you're just looking to keep going and keep triggering Oath, right? And Vaultborn is actually in some ways better than you don't want the ones that put multiple bodies into play that much, right? So Vaultborn gives you value in the right way, because it's just like one body that gives you a card back, gives you some life, keeps you alive.
No, makes sense. My number 4 is Sundering Titan, again, just because you're stopping your opponent from answering your threats. Number 3, I have Grizzlebrand, because if you can get Grizzlebrand, like, I'll be honest, 3 Grizzlebrand, 2 Atraxa, 1 Emrakul. It's kind of Oath of Druids is one of those cards that it doesn't. All you have to do to hit the things is put the cards in your deck.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you can cheat them, and it's a way of just free cheating into play those big things. I do feel that list is a little generic, if I'm honest with you. Like, is there anything that I've missed, kind of like anything kind of like specific for Oath of Druids that you think is cool? Kind of like I mentioned Nexus of Fate, but kind of anything like that, kind of that you have seen actually do quite a lot of work in a Oath of Druids deck.
I think, sometimes stuff that interacts with a graveyard can be really good. Like Torrential Gearhulk can be a really nice one.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Because obviously, even if you don't have the instant when the trigger goes on the stack, you're milling over a bunch, so that's pretty good. But honestly, when I'm building Oath decks, mostly, like, I'm hoping that Oath of Druids is not the only way I can put these creatures into play. And Oath of Druids basically works with all of them. So really, which creatures I want are probably determined more by how else am I putting them in. Like, do I also have a flash, in which case I want the flash cards? Do I have a sneak attack, in which case I want sneak attack cards? Do I have reanimates, in which case I want those cards? Because they're kind of all good with Oath of Druids, because Oath of Druids just puts it right into play and it stays there. I think the Sundering Titan I'm slightly suspicious of, just because I feel like my Oath decks are often quite a lot of colors.
So you feel, that's fair. So it's not going to be as free of just blowing up your opponent's lands.
Yeah, I think I'm going to blow up a lot of my own triumphs too.
Okay. I see. Yes. Okay. Yes. That makes sense.
Because Oath often I find, like, again, is pretty much the only green card sometimes. Other than maybe the big creatures, because a lot of what green is doing outside of that is playing creatures and small creatures, and I don't want the small creatures in my Oath deck. So I find often I'm like blue-black with an Oath, It's pretty common.
No, I'd agree. That makes sense. Oath is the kind of card I feel like I need to just commit to at some point. I see it early and just go for it and try and have a good time with it, because I've only seen people do broken things with it. Oath is a very dumb and very fun magic card.
It's almost like sometimes you're drafting with a companion when you have an Oath, except you have to draw it, which is why it's weaker for the companion. But it's a lot of fun as a card. The other thing I just want to touch on briefly with Oath is it's quite interesting how you play it sometimes if you have Oath and you open it. As in, do you just run it out there onto an empty board and say, well, you can't play creatures until you can deal with this, or do you sandbag it and try and wait till they've played a creature, then play the oath?
As someone who has not played anywhere near as much Oath of Druids as you, I'm going to say I think you want them to play a creature. Because, like, yes, you are going to take a hit from it, but I think it guarantees that you... I think otherwise it's just two people staring at each other until they draw their either hasty creature or their way of interacting with either your creature that you're going to put into play or your Oath of Druids. Is my gut. I think in Vintage and stuff, it's probably different because you can. It's just a race to pop off as quickly as possible. I think in Cube, I don't know, like if you have a counterspell or something like that, I think it gets a bit easier. Like if you have kind of backup to protect it, I think that makes it a bit easier to run out. But my gut is because and again, this might be me talking without as much experience as you, but for me, if I'm playing an Oath deck, one of the main things my deck is doing is Oathing. So I want it to work. It's kind of like playing a sneak attack on 5. If that makes sense. So you're going to get the hit. You're going to get to activate it the turn it comes in. That's my gut, but I'm fully open to kind of like, if you said otherwise, I would fully go with that because I know you've played it a bunch more than I have.
Yeah, I mean, that is my default. I would say, I think one of the differences between Oath and something like Sneak Attack is they always have a turn to do it, right? So it triggers on your upkeep. So there are matchups where sometimes if I'm playing against, say, a white aggressive deck, I'm like, well, you can't really develop without playing creatures. And if I have nothing else to do on 2, I might just run out the Oath because if you sit here and don't do anything for 5 turns, then that's really good for me. And what I don't want to happen is not spend my mana on turn 2, wait till you've played a creature, then I play my Oath, then you kill my Oath, and then I'm behind a bunch on tempo. Yeah, in general, I think the right approach, though, is in like a more normal mid-rangey matchup, I would take the approach of waiting, for sure.
I think it also depends on if you're in game 1 or 2. If you don't know the matchup and you just see them play a Plains, that's different to being like, I know you're on mono white, or I know you're on there's a difference between them playing a mountain on turn 1 and then playing a mountain and you know they're aggro, but they just haven't got 1 drop. They have a 2-drop coming, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, so that's Oath of Druids. We're going to move on to some more budget options now. So we'll briefly touch on cards like Monster Manual and Elvish Piper. Like, to an extent, things like Oath of Druids, things like Channel, things like, or even Tinker and Flash are actually relatively cheap. Like, primarily because they're banned in so many formats that no one wants them. Like, no one else can run them. So they might be too strong from a power level point of view for more budget environments. So effectively, this is like a sprinkling at the end budget section. So I'll read Monster Manual out. This is about a $5, so within the realm of budget, but it does give you access to more budget cheat effects. The Monster Manual is 3 and a green for a artifact. It has 1 and a green tap. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. It also has an adventure, Zoologist Study, 2 and a green, mill 5 cards. Return a creature card milled this way from your to your hand, so it's letting you dig for the creature as well. You also have the very classic Elvish Piper. It's a 4-mana 1/1 that you can pay a green and tap it to put a creature card from your hand into play. There's a bunch of these effects out there, and often they're pretty cheap and are nice ways of cheating just other things into play. So kind of like, James, we won't spend too much on the strategy of this because it is just, to an extent, it is just opening up this deck to more budget environments or more lower powered environments. Like, if you want to have a cheat deck, here's an Elvish Piper. It's letting you cheat on mana, basically. It's that kind of like, there isn't too much more to it other than that, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. I think this is a pretty nice little package to add to a sort of mid-power level cube. Basically saying, yeah, you can cheat in this giant stuff, but people are going to have a chance to interact with your Elvish Piper or whatever before you do. And that's the key point. Monster Manual, I think, is a decent amount better than the Elvish Pipers because it also finds the creature, and artifacts are harder to kill than creatures. But the nice thing about the Pipers as well is there's actually a ton of them.
There is a lot. I think I literally named the worst one.
Yeah, Elvish Piper is the worst Elvish Piper.
Yeah.
But there's Yeah, there's stuff like Ovia from Ether Drift, Champion of Ronus is quite
Yeah.
good.
There's a Werewolf Nightbound Daybound one. I think that's actually good if you can put up with Nightbound with Daybound Nightbound.
Yeah, fair. That's a tough sell, but
That
you can
is,
try.
yes.
But yeah, it's nice that you there's enough of them that you can kind of add it as a legit type, and add some large creatures to put in, and you can reliably see one if it's open, sort of thing, or if the archetype is open.
Exactly, and kind of one of the things that's nice in terms of the creature point of view is that because just of power creep, a lot of these cards I'm going to mention either do still see playing cube or saw playing cube up to very recently. But because of power creep in other formats, they have got very cheap. But in lower power level environments, they're still going to be pretty solid. Like a card like when I first started cubing, Terrastodon was a high pick in a green deck. 8 mana, 9/9. When it comes into play, destroy 3 target non-creature permanents. For each permanent put into River's way, it makes a 3/3 elephant. So the gimmick here is you destroy 2 of their lands and 1 of yours. You have 12 power, they have 6. You're going to win that race. Like Grave Titan is a phenomenal Reanimator card. I think this is still in my cube, and it's still a really good card. But Grave Titan is only is less than $5. It's like $1 nowadays because of just reprints in Commander decks. Like Ashen Rider is another great card that you can cheat into play with stuff like Elvish Piper. Ashen Rider is an 8 mana 5/5 Archon with flying that when it enters or dies, exile target permanent. Still a good Magic card. Like, I know we kind of mentioned it earlier. A card that's been high on all of our lists is Grizzlebrand. It's less than $5. Maybe don't add this to your budget cube, actually, because it's probably going to be the best card in there by quite a long way. I have a couple more I want to mention. Progenitus that must have been in the vintage cube until relatively recently, James.
Honestly, it was in for way longer than it should have been. I think it's it's good with exactly natural order, but
Yes.
like Sneak Attack for Genitus, not a good strategy.
Unless they're on 10.
Or less, yeah, they can be on 10 or less. Yeah. But it's but I don't want to have to sneak attack twice, I want to do it once. Yeah. And you can't reanimate it because it's the same as a Blightsteel, right? It's shuffled in instead. So
of course, yes. No, it makes sense. But then there's a bunch of cheap cool creatures out there. Like you really can don't just think that because we've been talking about these really broken Magic cards, like Blightsteel Colossus, we mentioned is an expensive Magic card. So is Portal to Phyrexia. If you're not super high on proxying in your cube, there are still answers out there. Basically, go to Scryfall, search by mana value, creature, descending, and find some creatures you think are cool. That is a great way of doing it for a budget. So the ones we have mentioned, I do think are the most optimal for the bits that we have chosen. And I hope we've explained the reasons why. And hopefully by doing this list, it's kind of given you a, if you have Flash in, or if you already have Sneak Attack in your cube and you seen a bunch of cards we've mentioned, you can see that the overlap with Flash is so strong, you could very easily add Flash, and then you're supporting this whole extra deck by only really having to add 1 card. Same with Tinker and some of the channel targets. There's a great amount of overlap with all these kind of effects.
Abomination is one I really not like. 30 cents. That was the MH3 cards, and that's in that really nice borderline of good to reanimate, but also castable at 4 black. So that might be a nice one for budget cubes, or honestly any cube. I think that card's just really strong.
It is an interesting thing, actually. Yeah, like Trumpeting Carnosaur is another great one we've seen recently. But it is interesting that kind of the days of 15 mana spells are very much behind us, because just as cards are getting better, the mana value of them is getting less. So there is still room to cheat things into play, but they need to be big, they need to be splashy, there need to be a reason. That kind of leads us nicely onto the final bit for today, because we've been talking about these as if you have kind of say in a draft, we've kind of given you the reasons of okay, I see my Reanimator, I see my Animate dead, or I see my Flash, or I see my Sneak Attack. What targets work well with that? Flipping it around, because sometimes in drafts you don't always see, you don't know the order you're going to see things in. James, to flip it around, what targets are you happy to take early before you've seen the enablers to enable them? So what creature or effect are you happy taking before you see the thing to cheat it into play.
Yeah, so I think there's two which are pretty far ahead here. There's Atraxa and Archon, because they're premium with several of the different ways that you can cheat stuff in, and they're so high impact when they work, and they just don't require the setup that some of the others do. You know, they're flexible enough that I feel like I'm happy taking it early, and that a decent chance that it ends up in my deck. And if it does, it's a huge upgrade to my deck. Obviously, taking a 8-mana card early, there's a decent chance you end up leaving it on the sidelines, but I think they're powerful enough to be worth speccing on in a way that most of the others just aren't, basically. You know, taking like an Emrakul, for example, earlier, that was top on a couple of our lists, right? Really, really powerful card. Maybe like even more powerful when it does its whole thing. But it's just way less likely to end up in my deck than Atraxa or an Archon, because it doesn't work with my Animate Dead if that's the lane that ends up being open, right? It doesn't work with Flash if I see that card. Whereas Atraxa, I think Atraxa is number one over Archon by quite a bit, because Archon doesn't really... I mean, it's acceptable with Flash, but it's not good with Flash. And it doesn't work with Natural Order, whereas Atraxa is basically great with all of them.
Yeah, I think Atraxa we only had top of Natural Order. It was second, for me anyway, in regular Reanimator. It didn't make instant speed Reanimator. But I would agree in terms of just it is. I think it is the best reanimation target because it is the best target for the cheat deck because it is so flexible and can kind of go. It is good in anything. Like you have a whole cube's worth of cheat targets coming your way or cheat effects coming your way. If you have the best one, it's likely that you're going to be able to find a way of putting it into play. One thing I did want to say about Emrakul, like this, I think it is just a state of kind of just like where we are in Magic. Like I remember LSV did a article a few years ago, and it was like for a powered cube, like outside of power and fetches, Emrakul and Grizzlebrand were the top cards to take after that. I think we have just seen where we are in Cube just because there's a big, just mid-rangey play to the board cards are so short. Like Minsk and Boo is so strong now, kind of like they kind of have overtaken them. The main thing I want to say with Emrakul is like some of these effects only work with some effects. So like Emrakul doesn't work with Flash, but it does work with instant speed reanimation effects. To an extent, you are trusting that if you see an Emrakul in the cube, there are ways of putting it into play. There should be a sneak attack. There should be if I see an Emrakul in a cube list, I am assuming that there is instant speed reanimation in there. I'm assuming there's a sneak attack in there. Because if there's not, it's a trap and that's a design flaw, in my opinion. And similar with Worldspine Worm. If I see a Worldspine Worm, I'm expecting to see sneak attack, or I'm expecting to see Flash. Kind of like you're not adding these payoffs for no reason. Like Troll of Khazad-dûm, cool. That you can hardcast that. Like if it's more than 7 or more mana, then we're at the point where I'm expecting the correlating cheat effect to be in there for that card to be in there, basically.
Yeah, for sure. It would be the equivalent of like putting Splinter Twin in your cube and no Exarch effects, right? Especially because I think personally, cubes should be not always be built with the assumption that everyone has looked at the list beforehand and figured out what's in and what's good to draft. I think cubes should kind of explain themselves a little bit. Like you should be able to see cards and assume the enablers are gonna be there. Like it might not be all of them, right? Like because Emrakul is in doesn't mean you have to have Shallow Grave exactly. It might be that Emrakul is in for channel and sneak attack, but there definitely should be something good to do with an Emrakul.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And like I hope again, one of the goals of this episode was to show that there is overlap. Like if you're building a cube, there's plenty of ways of cheating these things into play, and there's plenty of targets, and kind of hopefully this list is at least giving you like even if you don't want the exact ones on this list, like the things we have talked about at the start of each section to kind of like, this deck is looking for these type of things. You can go and find more budget ones. You can go and find ones that you like that aren't necessarily the most premium ones if you're doing a lesser powered cube. But if you're doing the more powered level cube, then hopefully these lists are a good starting place for you all to work with.
Yes, for sure.
Right, marvelous. That's going to do it for today. James, pleasure, man. Thank you for that. I think, yeah, that was really fun. I enjoyed doing a little tier list, as it were. And yeah, thank you for catching me out on a couple of them. But yeah, much appreciated. Thank you.
No, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Nice one. Thank you, dude. Do make sure you like, share, give the podcast a 5-star review, tell a friend, all that good stuff. We'll be back in a few weeks with our Final Fantasy set review. So do make sure you subscribe so you get notified when that episode comes out. But until then, it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.